जी हैं ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਅੱਜਕੱਲ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਸੋਚ ਟੀਵੀ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਦਰਜੀਤ ਕਾਲੀਰਾਏ ਅੱਜਕੱਲ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਜੋ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੀ ਨੇਤਾਗਿਰੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਨੇਤਾਗਿਰੀ ਦਾ ਹੁਣ ਨਤੀਜਾ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈਗਾ ਟਰੰਪ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਆ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਟਰੰਪ 2.0 ਬਟ ਇਹ ਜੋ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਟਰੰਪ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਾਰੇ ਆ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ ਇਲੀਗਲ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟਸ ਆ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ ਮੈਂ ਟੈਰਿਫਸ ਲਗਾਵਾਂਗਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਮਸਲੇ ਆ ਇਹ ਇਕੱਲੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਪਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ ਸੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਚਾਲੂ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਰੀਅਲ estate ਆ ਆਪਣੇ ਦੇਸੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਭਾਰਤੀ ਔਰ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫੈਮਲੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਬਾਹਰ ਪ੍ਰਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ 'ਚ ਗਏ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਨਿਊਜ਼ੀਲੈਂਡ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਪੈ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਨੋਰਮਲੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਇਹ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਘਰ ਘੁਰ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਰਹਿਣੇ ਦਾ ਇੰਤਜ਼ਾਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਔਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ ਜਮੇਲ ਕੌਰ ਨਾਲ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਰੀਅਲ ਸਟੇਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਮੈਲਬੌਰਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਆਪਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਪਾਲ ਬੀਸਲਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫੁੱਲ ਡਿਸਕਲੋਜ਼ਰ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਪਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਦਿਨ ਜਾਣੀ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਜ਼ਮਾਨੇ 'ਚ ਡਰ ਵੀ ਉਸੇ ਕਾਲਜ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਮੈਂ ਪੜ੍ਹਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਪਰ ਇਹ ਉਸ ਕਾਲਜ ਦਾ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਸੀ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਮੈਂ ਲੈਕਚਰ ਲੱਗਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ ਫੁੱਲ ਡਿਸਕਲੋਜ਼ਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਔਰ ਜਾਣ ਪਛਾਣ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੁੜਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ anyway welcome Paul that was an introduction to Paul and our common history to Wilmorton College of Further Education we have other mutual associations but our discussion today is about real estate you're a realtor you're in British Columbia give us an introduction about Paul the realtor and then we'll talk about the key piece here the impact of Trudeau, the impact of Trump, and these changes that have happened, at least in our two neighboring nations, and also what impacts they have. I mean, England went through a prime minister change, and there's some other elections coming up. You guys will probably have an election sometime this year. We don't know when, but not the politics, but the impacts of the political powers on the policies that they implement. So, Paul, tell us about Paul.
All right. So thank you so much, Inderjit. Paul Beesla. I'm in Surrey now. I was born and raised in Derby. And I went to college there, as you had just mentioned. And in 89, when I was 22, I moved over to Canada. I got married here. I've got a son who just recently got married as well. I've been in the banking industry as well. That's how I started here. And then with real estate, I've been here for maybe 20 years on and off, and now full time for the last 8-9 years in real estate. And I've seen the ups and downs. So a lot of changes.
Okay. Well, just on that, the ups and downs of real estate. From the consumer side, back in England, Margaret Thatcher came in and she brought in a change of tax deductions on mortgages. And this is back in 87, so we were both in England then. You might not have experienced it because you were a little bit younger than I. I had looked at buying a property over there. But what I remember back in that year of 87 and 88, when Margaret Thatcher proposed in the budget that she was going to eliminate joint tax deductions. Because what it was is a couple could buy a property and they could each take a certain amount of deduction on their taxes. And I believe in those days it used to be £30,000. £30,000 each gave them the ability to buy a mortgage house with a mortgage up to £60,000. This impact was going to cut down that to a single deduction per property. And from the time it was announced in April 88 to the time it was implemented, July 31st, property prices in Derby literally doubled or tripled. So policies make an impact. You've seen the ups and downs, and I'm sure some of those ups and downs are related to the policy changes, and the other thing that matters is the interest rates. We've recently seen interest rates in the twos and threes in the US. But my understanding of interest rates is they don't work like they do in America. We can get a 30-year fixed mortgage, and my rate is pretty good. It's fixed for the 30 years that I've had the mortgage. Give us an insight into Canadian mortgages. Are they fixed for the life of the loan, 30 years, or how does that work?
Actually, Paji, no, they're not. Generally speaking, if you're looking for a fixed mortgage, they usually people go for 3 or 5 years. Nobody really does anything higher than five, and I don't think banks offer more than 10 year anyways. But not a lot of people go for the 10 years. They find it to be too long. The mortgages are usually amortized over 25 to 30 years, which means it brings down the payment. It's a little bit more affordable. The longer the amortization, the lower the payment. There's also the variable mortgage, depending on what the prime rate does and what the Bank of Canada rate does. That will impact it. So if the rate's lower, then your interest portion is going to be lower on those variable mortgages, and that's what people have been opting for the last few years. Um, some people that want the stability and the peace of mind, they'd go for the fixed, and usually they'll go for the 3 or 5 years.
Okay, so basically, then I'm going to be, let's say I'm a buyer and you've helped me buy this house that we just closed contract on yesterday. And we probably have a variable rate mortgage or a 5-year fixed mortgage, like you said. In 5 years, that loan could go anywhere. So the question I have for you is if I take a mortgage in Canada with the adjustable rate and all the features it has, once that loan period, the initial loan period is done, can I keep that loan? Is there a cap on that interest rate, or do I need to shop around again?
Well, you would need to shop around. After the term is over, then you're free to shop around anywhere. But the only thing that you have to remember is if you're shopping somewhere else at a different institution, they will need all the documentation again. They need to approve you again. Whereas if you just renew it with the current lender, they usually don't require anything. They will just give you the options. It may not be as good a rate that some other institution may give you, but that would be the easier option, just to have it renewed over for the newer rate at that time.
Okay, okay, because what we have over here is adjustable rate mortgages. They're like sort of the 1-year arm, the 5-year arm, as they call them, a arm being adjustable rate mortgage. But
Hmm.
let's say you and I work out a deal in California and you're my mortgage lender, the mortgage that you're going to get me over here will have an interest rate, for argument's sake, let's say it's a 3%, it goes up to 4%, it goes up to 5%, and then it's based on the market rate. But that market rate also has a cap, so the cap may be 9%, and that means that my mortgage rate will not go above 9% ever if I keep that loan. Now,
Hmm.
if the mortgage rates were to drop to 2% or 3% like they did a few years ago, definitely I would want to refinance. Fixed rates
Right.
mortgages we get here now, I believe they're running at 6 and 7%. So adjustable rate mortgage, like you said, may be a cheaper rate today, but at the
Hmm.
end of the term of 3 years or 5 years, it may jump up to 8%. So I have to balance that. But what it appears to me is the Canadian market, at least in the loan mortgage rates, is constantly every so often 3 years, 5 years, we're always shopping. Yes, we can stay with the same lender and get a loan set up, but we're changing our payments, we're changing our structures, and although we may have more equity in our house, our loan value from the principal amount may be going down slowly. But every 5 years or every 3 years, I'm shopping for a loan. Is that a right summary?
Yes, it is. That's right. And a
Okay.
lot of the independent brokers, if you're going to an independent broker and you get a private mortgage because you don't fit into the traditional banking criteria, a lot of those private mortgages are usually one year term. After 1 year, you'll be shopping again, and if you've reestablished your credit or whatever the deficiency were, then you can get a better rate at the bank. Otherwise, you just go to renew with another private lender, and there you're going to be that becomes expensive because you're going to be paying higher interest rates, and you're going to be paying fees to the lender as well as the broker, and legal fees for both sides, for yourself and the lender.
Right. So, from the concept of somebody who wants to buy a house, let's look at what our Donald Trump is doing. He's announced that ICE is going around. They're going to catch all these illegal immigrants. Obviously, he's saying that they're going to go after the criminal element first. I don't think many people would argue the criminal element, but there's also those social impacts, and there's a large group resisting that. But let's assume that there's somebody else here who is fearful of Donald Trump's actions, and they get the opportunity, they move over to Vancouver, Canada, and they are looking now to establish, they brought some cash over, they found a job. What would be the requirement for this individual freshly coming to Canada? It doesn't matter if they came over from America or England or however. They're a fresh immigrant. They brought some money with them. Technically, they could buy the house with a down payment, but they come to you and they say, I'm looking for a house. What requirements, let's say me, would you need from me to enable me to get a house? But I've only just landed, walked through the door of Canada yesterday.
Okay, so I take it. I assume that you mean if somebody comes in legally to Canada.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so if you're coming
Legally.
into Canada legally, you may require a higher down payment. Again, I can't talk too much about the policies as far as mortgages go or legal aspect of it, but with the real estate, yeah, absolutely. If you're a foreign buyer, then you are not allowed to buy here. They've actually, I think they've put a cap on for 2 years for no foreign buyers to buy here. But if you're coming here as an immigrant and you've got your documentation, then absolutely you can buy here. You may require more of a down payment because you haven't established a credit here, but generally speaking, you would be able to buy as long as you're here legally and with the required documentation.
Right. I think what I'm looking for is there an employment requirement? And that's why I was saying I just walked through the door yesterday. I mean, I really
Oh,
don't may
okay.
not have a job yet. I come
Right,
in
right,
and I
yeah.
have, I knew I was coming to Canada. I sold my house in England, and I have enough money to put down maybe a 30% down payment. Now
Hmm.
I've learned that the Canadian prices are so out this, into the out of the hemisphere, literally.
Yeah.
Um, but I have enough for a down payment, but I've not applied for a job yet.
Yeah, no, the banks would be looking to see how you're going to make those payments, right? Um,
Right. So
without any
basically, I need
income.
your advice then to me is get a job, come back in about 6 months once you have a stable income, and then we can talk.
That's right.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
Knowing where the real estate market has gone over the last few years, and you have depth of knowledge in that from the 20 years that you've been doing this. Um, as a buyer, I have some experience as a person from the buyer side, but give us a flashback of Canadian real estate market, single family homes, families buying homes, wanting to buy homes. How has the market changed over the last 5 years?
Okay, so last 5 years, there's obviously been a lot of immigration. A lot of construction has happened. The prices have shot up to the sky. Um, Obviously, the interest rates in the last couple of years have increased quite a bit, which made affordability really hard. Um, but prior to that, say like 5 years ago, it was more affordable. Prices were not as expensive. Um, People were managing. They could, make their payments based on the income that they were making. Right now, with prices so high, unaffordability, and especially because they all want to live in the major cities. It's really hard. Interest rates are high. Inflation was high. Yes, it's come down and it's made somewhat of a relief. But generally speaking, it's been kind of like a roller coaster. Um, and it's been very, very difficult. New immigrants or somebody who's trying to get into the market, it's going to be really hard for them because they're going to need a huge down payment. Without the bank of dad or mom, they're just not going to be able to make it because the prices are so high. Um, something that was about 700,000 5 years ago, you're probably paying twice as much now for it, and it's the same property. Interest rates are higher than before, so the affordability is really tough right now.
Right. And from an experience perspective, when you came in as a young kid, um, you've grown and established yourself in the market since you've been there for over the last nearly 30 odd years. Similarly, on this side, have you ever in that time frame seen property prices go down significantly?
Um, Significantly. Maybe in the 90s when I first came here, they weren't as bad, but they've they've consistently been going up. I haven't really noticed any prices going down significantly. Maybe a little blip here and there, but nothing major. They've always gone up historically speaking, and since I've been here since '89, that's the way the trend has been.
Right. The foundation for that question is in England. When I've talked about the Margaret Thatcher situation, property prices rose. They literally went as much as triple because people were walking in and just putting in cash payments on houses just to take advantage of this mortgage benefit that they had. Post that, prices went down. I remember my house I bought it for 45 in Derby. I know that it went up to like 110 and then it went back to 70. I've known that in Derby. I've seen that here in America. And I correlate that to a discussion between the banking gods, if you want to call them. When America in 2008 had its financial crisis in the mortgage sector, what had happened is there was a history of negative amortization mortgages. So technically, I could come to Paul, the realtor, buy a house and get a 1% interest rate where the market rate was 7. What I didn't understand was what was happening to the other 6%. First year it was 1%, second year it was 2%, and ultimately 5 years at whatever 7-year arm or 5-year arm, it went to the market rate. Market rate now could be 7, 8%. By the time those 7 years, 8 years came to hit, people could not afford their mortgages. And when people could not afford their mortgages, they looked at their house and they bought it for 500,000. They suddenly woke up that the interest that they never paid was tagged onto the principal. So the
Mm-hmm.
$500,000 house actually had a $600,000 mortgage on it. And they couldn't understand that. I believe in many cases, the only people who understood that or knew that were the mortgage brokers, mortgage agents, or whatever we want to call them. Even realtors, I'm a realtor in California too. Even we did not understand the concept of negative amortization. We just said, hey, you can buy this house. It's only 1% to get you in. Next year it'll be 2%, but it's a great opportunity. And they bought. But
Mm-hmm.
some of these people got caught. And in 2008, the American market tanked. And the
Right.
house that I personally had bought for 550 had gone up in the value when the market was going up. It was appraised at 750. And that's within 6 months
Mm-hmm.
of me moving in.
Right.
By the time this market hit in 2009, my neighbor sold for 300 and
Wow.
two of my neighbors walked away. So the market had tanked so deep. So when I say significant price reductions, yes, we've seen them. I've seen a little bit of it in England, not as bad, but I've seen it here. And at that particular time, when the banking executives, the gods, were discussing this, I recall the Canadian uh, CEO of some bank or part of the Canadian bank system told the Americans, hey, we'd rather have a boring system than an exciting, fun one like yours. Because prior to this, apparently there were discussions that the Canadians were just sailing away. They weren't doing anything fun or exciting like what the Americans had ventured into with their free market because they'd taken away some of the controls. So, from that exciting banking where things are going, through the hills and down the valleys into the rivers, Canadians just taking a coastal walk, relaxing. Has that benefited you guys?
Yeah, I think so. Don't get me wrong. I mean, in the last couple of years, there have been people that kind of like spread themselves too thin, who are in trouble, can't make the payments, or just in financial turmoil. Um, so yeah, so some people have had a reduction in prices in their properties, the ones that ventured out too much. Um, because they thought that the prices were just going to keep going up, 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 up. And in the last year or so, since the rates were doubled, increased about 10 times in 23, affordability, they people just couldn't afford it. It was just getting too hard. There's a lot of people went into foreclosure or just sold their houses for a lot less than what they purchased for because they thought that it would be an investment. Uh, Obviously, there's a lot more policies in place now, and then the fear of deportation of students that were renting, and people had purchased houses to rent to those students. So if the students aren't here, they won't have any income to support their payments. Um, but I think with the US, I mean, yes, we pretty much go hand in hand, and there's times when you guys are doing better than us, and there's times when we're doing better in housing than the US as far as prices go. But right now, in especially in the bigger cities, whether it's Toronto, Vancouver, Surrey, yeah, there's some difficulty right now. People are struggling, and I think with this rate decrease lately, it's helping. But I think it's going to take some time before we get back on track.
Okay. And
Hmm.
when you say get back on track, I'm prompted to look at the what in India they call the center government, in the US they call the federal government, and I believe you call it the federal too.
Hmm.
Basically, the government based in Ottawa, Trudeau and his friends. Um, Regardless of the discussion by Trump on tariffs and stuff, and I'm sure that the big discussion there is tariffs will have an impact should they come into play. We'll do that second. Looking at Trudeau having resigned, and some of the big issues there being the carbon tax, and there's every day a sort of post that pops up, the carbon tax this, and they're now talking about possible leadership of the Canadian Liberal Party to replace Trudeau. We've had some comments from Jagdeep, and we're having comebacks from the Conservative side, Poilievre and Helen and everybody. Not trying to predict who's going to come in, not in an effort not to express any preferences, but looking at the turmoil and being analytical. Let's say the election happens as projected in October, and all these political ripples that we have are just sizing away because, regardless, we would have had an election come October 25. What policy changes do you think the administration will bring in that may make housing easier to afford or affordable or easier for the younger couples to get into. And you've also mentioned the bigger cities, and we hear it on this site. Prices are, sort of Canadians. If you bought it, great. But if you're looking to buy, it's not very rosy. So,
Right,
from
right.
do you think interest rate? I think where I'm going is, do you think interest rates will go down? Is there a wave that will make interest rates come down? What change, whether it be the carbon tax or something, might make a difference, positive difference?
Okay. I feel that there's a lot of uncertainty right now as far as interest rates, politics, and so forth. So many factors. The rates do need to come down more for it to be affordable. Um, I mean, they're low right now, but they need to go lower. No matter which party comes into play, they need to think about the economy here and the people here, and how they can support the housing market. And the way to do it is, bring those rates down and have more housing starts. There's not been a lot of housing starts, so there's not been incentives for builders. There's a lot of policies where, it's tax after tax after tax, and they need to kind of like get rid of that. They recently implemented the flipping tax, beginning of this year, where if you're purchasing a house, you cannot sell it within 2 years. And if you do sell it within 2 years, there's a 20% tax. However, if you keep it for 1 year and then you sell it in the second year, there's 10% and so forth. But things like that deter people from buying. Investors are out because if the investors are just going to be buying and there's tax on tax on tax, it defeats the purpose of them investing, right? And anybody who's basically just looking to buy a property, renovate it, and then sell, they can't sell for 2 years unless they want to pay the tax. And nobody wants to pay the tax because that's your profits, right? They're eating into your profits. But as far as I do think that there's a lot of policies that need to uh, be in place, and some need to be changed. Um, but yeah, no matter which party comes into effect, they do need to change the policies.
Um, you said new construction, and definitely whether it's America or Canada, the need for new construction is there. And another thing that's happened over the last few years that we've seen, um, the so-called environmental factor, or the let's just call it the environmental component, uh, global warming. Canada itself has seen a lot of fires. We had a large, over the last couple of years, fires that ravaged Canada, and some of the smoke was said to have blown over into the American side. Now, today, currently in California, we're experiencing a set of fires down in the LA area. I believe yesterday or something, there was a new one reported in the San Diego area. If we say the summer, the hot moments when the weeds and all these uh, grass growth and everything else in these forests and open areas is drying up because of the heat and the hot weather, and they become fuel for fire. Right now, we're not in that time frame. We're in a winter. Los
Mm-hmm.
Angeles, at least, is suffering from huge fires. And I recall that some of the Canadian fires were in a pretty, not a very hot season. But looking at the Canadian weather and the American weather, you guys have it significantly cooler. Um, when these fires happen, when these environmental disasters hit, in California, we're prone to earthquakes. On the East Coast, they have these hurricanes, and in the Midwest, we have these wind gusts and all that stuff. Putting nature into the picture, when nature takes and destroys, feel personally that that has an impact on the market because there's a lot of people who need to reconstruct. There's a lot of property, if we call it real estate property, live homes that are taken off the market, and we need to rebring them in. Apart from just rebuilding Los Angeles, San Diego, the Canadian fires, we need more houses than that, right?
Absolutely. There's a shortage of housing no matter where you go. There's a huge need for it. People are looking to buy, but if there's no supply, then but the demand is there. It makes it tough for them to get into something. People don't want to be renting all the time. They do need to kind of like get into a property, and they've been saving, and then all of a sudden, what happens is there's nothing affordable, right? Because the prices of the existing homes is so high. So they
Right.
do need to get some starter homes, right? Something that they can get into just to get into the real estate market.
And those environmental issues and everything. Is there any code changes that you, as a realtor, would like to see? And I'm looking at it from California. We have these restrictions, and particularly in my area, there's something that restricts you from building because there's a red-legged frog that lives in the neighborhood, and therefore you have to get clearances. Um, I think in Canada as well as America, there's some prohibitions on sort of Native American land or native burial grounds that sort of are protected by various regulations. Not to go into the heritage of Native America or Native Canada, and they're protected for justifiable reasons, is my view, not in, putting that on anybody else. But when you have these things like sort of they're blaming the California fires and the ability to not put them out because there was no water in the fire hydrants. And the water in the fire
Mm-hmm.
hydrants was not there because our governor was trying to protect the Delta smelt and the water was going into the ocean. That's a political view. I'm not supporting it, I'm not denying it. But the point is, some of these environmental policies to many people seem ridiculous. They will argue them as ridiculous. Equally, there's another
Mm-hmm.
side of our own fellow citizens who argue that we need to protect, and the Delta smelt is a necessary component of our environment. The red-legged frog is nearly extinct. I'm watching some of these programs from our own native back homeland, India. They've been talking about, sort of various tigers, lions, and other species going extinct. That's a worldwide problem. So we need to protect, but where do we draw the line? And do we need
Mm-hmm.
the red-legged frog to restrict a development? And it's not restricting it forever, but it's dragging it out for 15, 20 years for the developer. So I, a developer, come to you, the realtor, to buy some property. I'm buying this land to develop it. And suddenly there's this environmental issue that you didn't know about, nobody else knew about, but somebody has come in and brought it. Some environmental person has brought a lawsuit. Now we're stuck. Is there anything that, from a investment, from a humanitarian, all these features, environment too, that we could relax to make it easier
Well,
to
I
bring
think
in
there's a
housing?
lot
And
of
we got to address the homeless problem.
yeah. I think there are a lot of restrictions that are implemented right now, which deter people from buying or takes a lot. Sorry, to develop. Um, it's taking a lot longer to get the permits from the city halls because of a little issue. It could be just minor to some, a developer, but it may be huge in the environmental world. We have eagles' nests, for example, here, right? So I sold a property where it was 13 acres of commercial land, and it had a tree which had one eagle that would come and go. And because of that, they couldn't develop right away. They had to jump through hoops to be able to develop, but they had to leave a certain amount of buffer zone for that tree. They could not touch that tree, right? So things like that, yeah, it might be minor to a developer, But yes, the environmental people, it's a lot more. To the government, it may be a lot more. But I think there should be a happy medium somewhere, so that the process of developing and getting these new housing built is a lot more smoother and quicker. And yeah, you got to talk about efficiency as well. Like it's got to be efficient too.
And one reason why I was asking that question, Paul, is because the restrictions or the protections that we have existing in California, well, our governor suddenly put a waiver on them. So if we now want to
Hmm.
go, you and I come into Los Angeles and we decide to invest and develop there, we are going to be protected against those regulations. So, from a not trying to get into the politics of it, you just said there needs to be a balance. And I think that
Hmm.
balance needs to consider the component that if we're going to cancel these because there's suddenly an urgent need, should we not evaluate the total need for these? Why are we going to make life hard for people just because? Because if we can get rid of
Hmm.
them and cancel them, are they really needed?
Yeah, yeah, true, true. Hard to say. Hard to say.
Yeah. So, anyway, looking ahead, for real estate in Canada, in your neighborhood, in Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, um, those major cities, Ottawa. I believe because of the weather and the environment generally, some of these places have lower populations, but the growth of population is impacting similarly across these bigger cities. The one reason why we don't buy in the rural or the outer lying areas because most times we have to travel to work in the bigger city and then we have to consider the travel time. Um, is there anything that these powers that be could do to make it easier? And we had this over the last 4 or 5 years with COVID, work from home, and people running to buy in rural areas because you could leave the big city of Surrey or Vancouver and go a couple of miles out, buy 5 or 10 acres, have a nice home, and be able to chill and relax in your own 5, 10 acres. Apart from working remotely, you could do a whole bunch of other things. Now, we've had mandates, at least Mr. Trump signed a mandate a day or two ago, and requiring federal government workers to get back to the office. Many other corporations have started doing that. So we're having this wave of come back to the office. That is what, in my view, makes people want to buy into the cities. We may be able to buy a larger, more comfortable property, cheaper property out of town, but the 1 hour, 2 hour drive is what restricts our ability to do that. From a future perspective, knowing there's a need for houses, what would you recommend to a seller who's looking to sell and move? And maybe as somebody in our age category looking at retirement and looking at the sort of years of relaxing, wants to sell in Vancouver, but wants to move to the rural areas. Should he sell first and buy later, or should he buy first and sell later?
Ah, catch 22. I feel that as long as a person does their numbers, then maybe selling, I would suggest, um, because then you've got the money, and at the same time, look for a property that you're interested in, whether it's in the rural area or within the city, but just downsizing. Um, but definitely, each person has to, I guess, look at their own um, needs, and then take it from there. But absolutely, there was a lot of people here as well in Surrey, Vancouver, that moved out to areas like Abbotsford and Chilliwack, which is more rural. Even though they're growing a lot more now, and it's just more affordable out there, and you get more for your for your money there. Um, but here, all the amenities are mostly here. Jobs are here. Uh, Children want to stay here because of their universities, colleges, their friends. Um, and like you said, a lot of people, they don't want to commute, right? They'd rather be closer to work and, uh, to all the other amenities, that facilities that they need and want. Um, and that's why people have been building houses with secondary suites here too, to accommodate that, so that they can live here and then offset the payments by getting some rental income from the basement suite, or whether it's a coach house, laneway home, or whatever it is.
Thank you. And now the other way around. I've come in, I've got a job at one of these corporations, and I've started work. I've got a history of career employment at other places too. Now I'm looking at buying. Based on your crystal ball, are you going to suggest I wait until not Trudeau, but Collier or Jagmeet or somebody comes in and brings in market favorable conditions, lowering interest rates, making it easier sort of to qualify? Or are you going to say, buy it now because whatever happens in Ottawa, they're going to make policy changes to make housing more affordable. But when the interest rates fall, we're going to have more buyers. And when more buyers come into it, supply and demand hits, prices go up. So buy it now.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I feel that if somebody can afford it, they should buy now, because there's no guarantee what the policies may be when the government changes. We don't know what they're going to bring in. Absolutely, if the rates come down, it's going to be more affordable. We are going to have a lot more buyers. There's going to be inventory as well, more inventory, more sellers. So people. I think if they can afford to buy it, they should buy it now, and then take it from there. Because, like I said, we don't know what's coming around the corner once the government changes.
Right, because one of the things I hear in California side is buy it now, and if the interest rates go down, refinance. Is that something you would do?
um, Refinance if you need to, right? But
Okay.
I
Looking
mean,
back at
generally
your crystal
speaking, I mean,
ball,
sorry, go ahead.
where do you think real estate in Canada is going to go over the next 5 years?
I think the market's going to be pretty good. I think the interest rates will be pretty stable. The There's going to be a lot more housing starts, hopefully, and I think it's going to be a little bit more affordable. Whether people are, buying joint ventures, because we're hearing about that too, where friends are getting together or family members are getting together and purchasing something, so that's more affordable that way for them. As far as the pricing, I think it'll still go up, um, and I think the economy is going to be better. Yeah.
Okay. And I think in the interest of time, you're a busy person. I'm a retired person, so I got all day. But to save you time, where I want to go is I've come in to see you as a new buyer. I'm going to go back to that kid who's got a job in the Vancouver corporate offices, doing well in the career. It's a couple, and they want to buy that house. We'll call it $900,000. It's a condo somewhere. What income requirement do you think they need to qualify to buy that property? They have the down payment, let's say 20%. I think that's about right. So 20% down
Hmm.
payment, this couple has it. They're both just starting their careers, they're planning their family. A lot of the things, character numbers and the finances are considered as of today. They've got income, they're working professionally, but to buy that house, what income do they need on a monthly, annual basis?
Okay. Without actually being able to calculate it roughly, you're probably looking at, because the monthly payment cannot be more than 32% of their income. So based on that, you're looking at a couple hundred thousand easy per year that they'll need. Um,
Okay.
yeah. So and don't quote me on that because I haven't done any calculations on it. Neither am my mortgage
No, I'm
broker.
not going to try and quote you on that, but I think what I was
Yeah.
looking for is what you said is a percentage of income that you're
Right.
making. And we have a similar number
Hmm.
here. I've been talking to a buyer, and I have a guy I work with over here who's a lender, broker in that concept. And I had a discussion with him last weekend. I said, I got this couple, they want to buy a house, and the house is 750. What do they need to qualify? And he comes back,
Hmm.
and it just so happens that these people are younger than me. Uncle, they need to have 40% income and all this other stuff. So basically, the percentage of income that you can spend on your mortgage is a common factor. So I think you said 32%, and I think here it's
Yeah.
about the same because you got to pay your a mortgage, you got to pay your bills, and you got to get your groceries, and you got to go watch a movie. So they try and accommodate all that into your income allowances and everything else of what you can comfortably live with. So the number
Hmm.
you threw out there, I think that's what I was primarily looking for. I'm not looking for
Right.
a
Right.
dollar value. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
because generally speaking,
yeah,
the ratios that the banks usually work on are like around 32/40, 32 being for your housing costs, and 40 being your housing plus all your costs for your whether it's credit card, loan, car payment, and so forth. Right. So those are
right.
the two numbers that they generally, and there's a little bit of room to kind of like go back, a little bit over,
Right.
uh,
So
depending on your
basically,
location.
I'm this young kid who says, "Hey, I'm looking for a house. You're going to ask me how much is your car payment, how much are your credit card bills, and you're making 10,000 a month. Okay, you can afford a house of about 3,200 a month payment. So that's literally what
Hmm.
we're looking at in terms of. But the total consideration is there. If you're driving a Bentley and your payment is $6,000 and you want to buy a house, sell the Bentley.
That's right. Yeah. See what you need
All
first.
right, Paul. Um, Thank you for this discussion and insight into Canadian Vancouver real estate and your insights. Thank you for sharing those. Um,
Thank you.
yes, we have a common Derby background. That was our full disclosure. But what I'm trying to do is educate our communities across all sides and look at common factors that are impacting us. The political policies impact us, the mortgage interest rates impact us. But what you and I have just come up with, Canada and America, apart from being neighbors, they have a common income factor when it comes to buying a property. You need to be around 32, 33%, and your total expenses will come in. So, if anything, that's what we've come to agree on. Thank you
That's
for your
right.
time. I hope to do another one
Okay.
soon after we know what's happening over on the Canadian side or what changes come on the American side. But just focusing on real estate and mortgages because that impacts all our families. So thank you
Yes.
and look forward to another
Thank you for
discussion.
having. Okay. Thank you for
Thank you.
having me here. Okay.
Thank you, Paul. ਓਕੇ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਸੋਚ ਟੀਵੀ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਪੌਲ ਬੀਜ਼ਲਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੀਅਲ ਏਸਟੇਟ ਏਜੰਟ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੋਰਗੇਜ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਘਰ ਵੀ ਵੇਚਦੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਖਿਆਲਾਤ ਸੋਚ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਕੀਤੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਘਰ ਖਰੀਦਣਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਰਹਿਣੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਕੋਈ ਆਸ ਨਾ ਰੱਖੋ ਵੀ ਅੱਜ ਜੇ ਮਹਿੰਗਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਕੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਸਸਤਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਏਗਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰਟੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਵਧਣੇ ਹੀ ਆ ਸੋ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ 'ਚ ਫੇਰ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਚਲੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਟਰੰਪ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਆ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁਣ ਕੌਣ ਆਊਗਾ ਉਹ ਤੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਕਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਆਊਗੀ ਜੋ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਦਲਾਅ ਆਊਗਾ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਪਾਲ ਐਂਡ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਅਗਲੀ ਵਾਰੀ ਫੇਰ ਮਿਲਦੇ